The photograph shows two old hands holding a cup of coffee. The hands are speckled with age, the knuckles swollen, the nails clean but yellowed with years of salt and oil. The coffee cup is enameled steel, chipped white with a blue rim, the kind that came standard on merchant vessels in 1972. Steam rises from it, caught mid-curve by the camera's flash, and beyond the hands and the cup there is a window. The window is round, porthole-sized, and through it the sea stretches flat and gray to a horizon that could be anywhere. The photograph was taken at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. The hands belong to Stanley Croft, 74 years old, retired maritime engineer, and the coffee in the cup is the last thing he will drink in his own home for 3 years, but he doesn't know that yet. The flash that freezes this moment is his daughter-in-law's phone camera, because she is documenting the condition of the house for the eviction notice she will serve him by noon that same day. But Stanley does not know that yet. So he smiles for the picture, and Iris Croft, his wife of 48 years, stands behind him with her hand on his shoulder, and her wedding ring catches the light, and the tide chart she has kept in her jacket pocket for 30 years presses against her hip like a secret heartbeat. The parallel ruler lies on the windowsill beside the coffee cup. It is brass, 12 inches long, with a beveled edge that has worn smooth from decades of drawing shipping lanes across nautical charts. Stanley received it in 1971, his first day aboard the MV Atlantic Star, from a chief engineer named Hendricks who said, "The sea doesn't care about your degrees, boy. The sea cares about this." Hendricks died in 1989, heart attack in the engine room of a tanker off the coast of Singapore, but the parallel ruler survived every voyage Stanley ever took, and it sits on the windowsill now in the small house in Port Townsend, Washington, where Stanley and Iris have lived for 32 years. The house is paid off, the house is theirs, but not for long. The betrayal begins with a key. Iris hears it first, the scrape of metal in the deadbolt at 11:47 a.m. on that Tuesday in November. She is in the kitchen, washing the breakfast dishes by hand because the dishwasher has been broken since July and Stanley hasn't had the energy to fix it. The arthritis in his hands has been getting worse, and she hasn't told him that she noticed the tremor in his right hand when he tried to solder a wire 3 weeks ago, because he would only worry, and worrying would make the tremor worse, and then he would try to fix things he couldn't fix, and the cycle would spiral until one of them broke. So she washes the dishes by hand, the key turns. Iris knows the sound of every key that has ever opened this door. There is the smooth, oiled slide of Stanley's house key, the slightly hesitant catch of her own, the clumsy fumble of their son Michael's spare key, which he has never learned to use properly because he always jams it in too fast. This is not any of those keys. This key scrapes. It is new. It has edges that have not yet worn down to fit the lock's particular geography, and it forces its way in with the confidence of someone who believes the lock will yield because it should. The door opens. Iris turns from the sink, her hands still wet, a plate dripping in her grip. Her son Michael stands in the doorway. Behind him, his wife Paige holds a phone in her hand, the screen dark but the camera lens visible, recording. "Mom," Michael says, "we need to talk." Michael Croft is 47 years old. He owns a software company in Seattle that his father has never fully understood but has always been proud of. He drives a black Range Rover with tinted windows and leather seats that cost more than his parents' first house. He wears a Patagonia fleece that is not for show but for function, because he genuinely does go hiking, and the fleece is expensive because he can afford expensive things, and this is the precise detail that makes his father unable to hate him. Stanley wants to be proud. He has always wanted to be proud, but pride does not live in the same room as betrayal. "Michael," Stanley says, and his voice is calm because he has spent 74 years learning how to keep his voice calm when everything inside him is burning. He stands up from his chair by the window. The parallel ruler is still on the sill. He does not touch it. "You're here early." Paige steps past Michael into the house. She does not take off her shoes. She wears leather boots with a heel that clicks against the hardwood floor, and Iris watches that heel press into the wood and thinks about how Stanley sanded and refinished that floor himself, on his hands and knees, 3 summers ago, when his back still worked well enough for him to kneel for hours. "The house needs to be sold," Michael says. No preamble, no apology, no coffee. Stanley looks at his son, and for a moment he sees the boy who used to sit on his lap while he drew shipping routes at the kitchen table, the boy who would trace the parallel ruler along the edge of a chart and ask, "Where does this line go, Dad?" "It goes here," Stanley thinks. "It goes to this moment." "Why?" Iris asks. She sets the plate down. Her hands are steady because she has already known this was coming. She has known it for months, in the way that Michael's phone calls grew shorter, in the way that Paige stopped bringing the grandchildren over, in the way that the letters from the bank started coming addressed to Michael's office instead of to the house. Iris is a marine biologist. She has spent her life reading signs that no one else sees. She watched the tides for 30 years, noting the patterns, the deviations, the small warnings that a storm was coming long before the sky darkened. She knew this storm was coming. She just didn't know it would arrive on a Tuesday. Because you can't afford to keep it, Michael says. He has rehearsed this. Stanley can hear the rehearsal and the rhythm of his words, the way they fall in practiced sequence. The property taxes have gone up. The maintenance costs are too high for you to manage. Paige and I have been looking into assisted living options. No. Stanley says it quietly, but the word lands like a stone in still water. Dad, no. Michael looks at Paige. Paige looks at her phone. The camera is still recording. Dad, you're 74. Mom is 71. This house is 2 stories. You can't even get up the stairs without stopping to catch your breath. I stop because I'm admiring the photographs on the wall, Stanley says. That's not the same as needing to stop. Stanley. Paige says his name like she has a right to use it, and she has not. She has been married to his son for 16 years, and in that time she has called him Stanley exactly 14 times, always when she wanted something. We're trying to help you. The house is worth $800,000 in this market. You have no savings. Your pension barely covers your prescriptions. If you sell now, you can move into a nice facility, have some money left over, and not have to worry about anything for the rest of your lives. The rest of your lives. Stanley thinks about what that means. The rest of your lives in a room with a bed and a television and a call button. The rest of your lives with meals served at set hours and activities scheduled by people who have never met you. The rest of your lives in a place where the windows don't open because of liability concerns. No, he says again. Iris moves to stand beside him. She is shorter than he is and thinner, and her hair has gone completely white in the last 5 years, but there is something in the set of her shoulders that makes her look taller. She reaches into her jacket pocket and pulls out the tide chart. It is a single sheet of paper, folded and refolded so many times that the creases have worn through. The paper is soft with age, the ink faded. But the annotations are still visible, dates and times and notes in her careful handwriting, 30 years of watching the sea, 30 years of knowing when the water would rise and when it would fall. She does not unfold it. She does not look at it. She holds it. That is enough. We're not leaving, she says. You don't have a choice, Paige says, and now her voice changes. The veneer of concern cracks, and underneath it is something harder. We've already started the paperwork. The house has to be sold to cover the reverse mortgage you took out. Stanley blinks. Reverse mortgage? Michael's face goes through a series of small movements that Stanley has seen before, the facial tics of a man caught in a lie who is trying to find a way to make the lie true. He remembers these tics from Michael's childhood, the way his face would shift when he said he had finished his homework when he hadn't, when he said he hadn't taken money from his mother's purse when he had. Michael, Stanley says slowly. What reverse mortgage? There's no point in pretending, Paige says. Show them the documents. Michael pulls a folded sheaf of papers from the inside pocket of his fleece. He holds them out to his father, and Stanley takes them, and he reads, the document is dated 18 months ago. It bears his signature, but Stanley has never signed a reverse mortgage. He has never even discussed a reverse mortgage. He looks at the signature, and he knows immediately that it is not his. The slant is wrong. The pressure is wrong. He has signed his name on engineers' reports for 40 years, and his signature is a precise thing, the S a tight coil, the C a clean arc. This signature is looser, sloppier, the pen lifted in the wrong places. But is close enough to fool a bank. It is close enough to fool a notary. It is close enough to destroy him. You forged my signature, he says. Michael says nothing. You forged my signature, Stanley repeats, and now his voice is not calm. Now his voice is a hollow thing, a ship's horn heard from miles away, a sound that carries grief in its low frequency. Dad, don't call me that. Iris takes the papers from Stanley's hands. She reads them. Her face does not change. She has spent her life observing. She knows that the most dangerous animals are the ones that do not move. You did this, she says, not a question. A statement. We did it to protect you, Paige says. The house was going to be a liability. We had to act. You forged my husband's signature. It's done. It's been done. The house is going to be sold. If you cooperate, we can get you into a nice facility. If you don't, you'll be evicted and you'll end up in a county home, and believe me, you don't want that. Iris folds the tide chart and puts it back in her pocket. We're not going anywhere, she says. And then she walks past them out the door, into the November cold. Stanley follows her. They leave the coffee cup on the windowsill. They leave the parallel ruler. They leave everything. Outside, the air is wet and cold. The sky is the color of old tin. Iris is standing on the front porch, her arms crossed, her breath making small clouds that dissolve in the wind. "We can't go back in there," she says. "I know. We can't fight this legally. They have the documents. They have the money. We have nothing. I know. So we have to make a different choice." Stanley looks at his wife. She is 71 years old, and she has been the constant center of his life for 48 years, and he has never stopped being surprised by her. In the engine rooms of the ships he worked on, there were instruments that could detect the slightest vibration, the smallest deviation from the norm. Iris is like that. She feels the shifts before anyone else does. She knows when to hold steady and when to move. "Where do we go?" he asks. She looks at him, and there is something in her eyes that he has not seen in years. Not desperation, not fear, calculation. "Remember the lighthouse?" she says. The lighthouse is 3 hours north of Townsend, on a stretch of coast that most people have forgotten exists. Stanley remembers it because he helped survey it in 1998 during a project for the Coast Guard. The lighthouse had been decommissioned in 1985, its light replaced by an automated buoy. The structure itself remained, a white concrete tower rising from a rocky outcrop at the base of a cliff. The fog had been so thick that day that Stanley had almost walked off the edge of the cliff, and the lighthouse keeper, the last one, a man named Garrett, who had been there since 1962, had laughed and said, "That's how the sea takes you. Not with a wave, with a misstep." Garrett died in 2003. The lighthouse has been empty since. Iris remembers it because she visited once in 1995 to study the intertidal zone around the rocks. She had climbed the tower, all 97 steps, and stood in the lamp room and looked out at the sea and thought, "This is what it feels like to be small." She has never told Stanley that she thought about the lighthouse every day for the next 28 years. She has never told him that she kept the key. It takes them 3 hours to get there because they have no car. They walk to the bus station. They take the 2:15 bus to Port Angeles. They walk north along the highway for 2 miles in the cold, and the sun sets at 4:47 p.m., and the dark comes fast. Stanley's hands hurt. The arthritis is bad in the cold. He does not complain. He has never complained, not about the cold, not about the pain, not about the 40 years he spent in engine rooms where the temperature never dropped below 100 degrees, not about the year he worked on a salvage ship in the North Atlantic and lost 2 fingers to frostbite and had them reattached but never quite got the feeling back in the tips. He does not complain now. He walks. Iris walks beside him. She has the tide chart in her pocket. She has the key. She has a plan. The cliff path is overgrown. They find it at 6:33 p.m., by the light of Stanley's penlight, the one he has carried in his pocket for 15 years, because old engineers know that darkness is not a problem if you are prepared. The path has been reclaimed by blackberry brambles and salal, the vegetation so thick that they have to push through it, and the thorns catch at their clothes, and Iris's jacket tears at the shoulder and Stanley's hands bleed, but they do not stop. The path ends at the cliff edge. Below them, the lighthouse stands. It is smaller than Stanley remembers. The paint has faded to a gray-white, and the iron railing around the lamp room is rusted, and the windows are dark, and the sea crashes against the rocks at its base with a sound that is both violence and rhythm. But it is there, it is solid, it is theirs. "How do we get down?" Iris asks. Stanley shines the penlight along the cliff face. He sees the old stairs cut into the rock, narrow and steep and slick with spray. The railing is gone, the steps are crumbling. "We go down," he says. The descent takes 40 minutes. Stanley goes first, testing each step before he puts his full weight on it. The arthritis in his hands makes it hard to grip, but he grips anyway, because the alternative is the rocks below and he is not ready to meet the rocks below. Iris follows, her hand on his shoulder, and she counts the steps under her breath, a habit from the years when she counted tide cycles, a rhythm that keeps her calm. 97 steps, the same number as the tower. They reach the base, and the lighthouse rises above them, and the sea is so close that the spray reaches their faces. Stanley takes the key from Iris's hand. He puts it in the lock. The lock is rusted. The key sticks. He turns it, and the mechanism groans, and for a moment nothing happens. Then the lock opens. The door swings inward. The inside of the lighthouse is cold and dark and damp. The air smells of salt and rust and old paint. The floor is concrete, cracked, covered in a layer of dust that has settled over everything like a shroud. There is a table in the center of the room, overturned, one leg broken. There is a chair against the wall, its seat rotted through. There is a stove, kerosene, rusted beyond use. There are no lights. There is no heat. There is no water. But the walls are thick, and the roof is intact, and the door locks from the inside. Stanley closes the door. He He turns the deadbolt. He leans against the wall and he closes his eyes, and for the first time in 18 months, he breathes. "We can't stay here," Iris says. "We don't have anywhere else. We'll freeze. Then we need to find a way to not freeze." Stanley opens his eyes. He shines the penlight around the room. The beam catches the stairs, the spiral staircase that leads up to the lamp room. The steps iron and narrow and steep. "How far up does this go?" Iris asks. 987s to the lamp room, Stanley says. There's a storage room halfway up, and the lamp room itself, it's enclosed. Glass walls, but the glass is thick, and the old lamp mechanism is still there. It's going to be cold, but it'll be above the spray line. Drier. "You want to live in the lamp room." "I want to survive," Stanley says. "The lamp room gives us the best chance." They climb. Iris counts the steps again. 47 to the storage room, where they find a rusted cot, a stack of old canvas tarps, and a box of candles that have melted into a single wax mass. 50 more steps to the lamp room, where the old Fresnel lens sits silent and dark, its prisms catching the light from Stanley's penlight and scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. The lamp is round, maybe 12 feet in diameter. The walls are glass, reinforced with iron frames. The floor is iron grating. The ceiling is a dome of glass and iron, and through it they can see the stars. Iris stands in the center of the room, and she looks up at the stars, and she thinks about how small she is. Stanley sets down the canvas tarps. "Tomorrow," he says, "I'll figure out how to get water and heat. And food? Tonight? Tonight we sleep." He spreads the tarps on the iron floor. They are stiff and smell of mildew, but they are better than nothing. He lies down. Iris lies beside him. She pulls the tide chart from her pocket and unfolds it, and she spreads it over them like a blanket. 30 years of tides. 30 years of knowing when the water would rise and when it would fall. She holds it against her chest, and she closes her eyes, and she listens to the sea. The first month is survival. Stanley wakes at dawn every day, his body stiff, his hands aching. He finds the old generator in a shed at the base of the tower, a diesel-powered relic from the 1970s. It has not been started in 20 years. The fuel line is clogged, the battery is dead. The engine is seized, but Stanley is a maritime engineer. He takes the generator apart piece by piece. He cleans the fuel line with a strand of wire from the railing. He rebuilds the carburetor using parts scavenged from the old kerosene stove. He charges the battery using a solar panel he finds in the storage room, a small thing cracked, but still capable of drawing power from the weak November sun. It takes him 3 weeks. On the 22nd day, the generator starts. The sound is loud and rough and beautiful, and Iris hears it from the lamp room, where she is cleaning the glass with salt water and shredded canvas, and she closes her eyes and smiles. They have electricity. Water is harder. There is no well. There is no stream. There is only the sea, and the sea is salt, and salt cannot be drunk. But the lighthouse has a roof, and the roof collects rain, and the old gutters still work. Stanley finds a plastic barrel in the storage room, the kind used for storing oil. He cleans it with seawater and sand, rinses it a dozen times, and sets it under the downspout. November is wet. The barrel fills. They have water. Food is the hardest. They have no money. They have no transportation. They have no way to buy food, and the nearest town is 12 miles away, and the road is overgrown and treacherous. But the sea is full of life, and Iris knows the tides. She finds mussels on the rocks at low tide. She finds clams in the sand. She finds kelp edible and full of nutrients. She knows which seaweed is safe and which is poison. She knows when the crabs come in and when they go out. She has spent 30 years learning the language of the sea. Now the sea feeds them. By the end of the first month, they have a routine. Stanley wakes at 5:30. He checks the generator, checks the water barrel, checks the structural integrity of the stairs, the railing, the windows. He has started keeping a log, the way he did on ships, noting the temperature, the wind speed, the condition of the equipment. Iris wakes at 6:00. She checks the tide chart, notes the low and high times, and goes down to the rocks to gather what the sea has left. She has started keeping a log too, a second tide chart, a fresh sheet of paper she found in the storage room. She draws the tides as they happen, comparing them to her old annotations, seeing the patterns shift and change. They eat breakfast together at 7:00. Mussels, seaweed, rainwater. They work through the day. Stanley repairs. Iris gathers. They talk, but not about their children. They talk about the sea. The second month is harder. The cold deepens. December brings storms, and the windows of the lamp room shake in the wind, and the spray from the waves hits the glass so hard that it sounds like gravel being thrown. The temperature drops below freezing, and the barrel of water develops a skin of ice that Stanley has to break every morning. His arthritis worsens. He not tell Iris, but she knows. She sees the way he moves, the careful way he picks up his cup, the way he flexes his fingers when he thinks she is not looking. She does not tell him she knows. Instead, she finds a way to make the lamp room warmer. She cuts the canvas tarps into strips and stuffs them into the gaps around the window frames. She hangs the remaining tarps from the ceiling, creating a tent within the room, a smaller space that holds their body heat. She finds an old oil lamp in the storage room and Stanley repairs it, and they burn lamp oil at night, and the flame gives them light and a small, precious warmth. They sleep in the tent. They sleep close together, sharing their heat. They sleep. December 14th is the worst night. The storm comes from the southwest, and it hits the lighthouse with a force that makes the whole tower shake. The wind screams through the gaps that Iris has not managed to seal. The rain comes sideways, finding cracks in the glass and water pools on the iron floor. Stanley wraps himself around Iris, and she wraps herself around the tide chart, and they wait. The storm lasts 18 hours. When it passes, the sun comes out, and the sea is calm, and the lighthouse is still standing. They have survived. January is quiet. Stanley finds a cache of supplies in the storage room that he missed before, a box of canned goods, tinned meat and vegetables, left by the last lighthouse keeper and forgotten for 20 years. The cans are dented, the labels faded, but the contents are still good. They have real food. Iris finds a book in the storage room, a paperback novel, its cover torn off, its pages swollen with moisture. She dries it by the lamp, page by page, and she reads it aloud to Stanley in the evenings. It is a mystery. They never learn the title. They do not need to. By the end of January, the lighthouse is livable. The generator runs for 4 hours a day, giving them enough power for a single light bulb and a small radio that Stanley has repaired. The water barrel is full. The garden Iris's idea, a small plot of soil she carried up from the base in buckets, planted with seeds from the canned tomatoes, has sprouted in the lower ring of the lamp room, green shoots reaching for the light. They have a routine. They have a home. They have each other. The photograph comes on February 3rd. It slides under the door of the lighthouse at noon, a single sheet of paper folded once, the ink smeared by the damp. Stanley picks it up. It is a photograph of the house in Port Townsend. His house. Their house. It has been painted a different color, a gray-blue that he has never seen before. There is a for sale sign in the front yard. On the back, in Michael's handwriting, the house sold. We are moving forward with the legal process. Please contact us so we can arrange your placement. We are trying to help you. Stanley reads it 3 times. He hands it to Iris. She reads it once, and then she folds it, and she puts it in her pocket next to the tide chart. We're not going back, she says. I know. We're staying here. I know. And if they come here, we fight. Stanley looks at his wife. Her face is thin now, the cheekbones sharper, the eyes deeper. She has lost weight. They have both lost weight. There is a light in her eyes that he has not seen in years, a fire that the cold has not extinguished. How do we fight? He asks. Iris pulls the tide chart from her pocket. She unfolds it, and she runs her finger along the annotations, the 30 years of data, the record of every high and low, every spring and neap, every storm and calm. I've been watching the tides here, she says. They're different from the charts. The rocks affect the flow. The water moves differently than the predictions say. What does that mean? It means I know this coast better than anyone alive. She looks at him, and she smiles, and it is the smile of a woman who has spent her life reading the ocean's secrets. I think we need to find out exactly what rights we have, she says. The discovery happens on February 7th. Stanley is in the storage room, searching for a spare part for the generator when he finds the box. It is metal army green, the kind used for storing ammunition. It is wedged behind a stack of old paint cans, and he almost misses it, but his foot catches the edge, and he hears the hollow sound of metal against metal, and he pulls it out. The box is heavy. He opens it. Inside there are documents. Old documents, yellowed with age, the paper brittle. They are official forms, stamped with government seals, signed by Coast Guard officers and state officials. Stanley reads them. His hands start to shake. Iris hears him call her name, and she comes down from the lamp room, and she finds him sitting on the floor, the documents spread around him, his face the color of ash. What is it? She asks. He hands her the top document. It is a letter, dated 1987, from the Washington State Historical Society to the United States Coast Guard. It reads, in accordance with the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, the Point Reyes Lighthouse, USCG Station, No. 7042, has been officially added to the National Register of Historic Places. As a designated historic structure, the lighthouse and the land within a 50-foot radius are subject to the provisions of the Act, including provisions for the preservation and maintenance of the structure by qualified parties. Additionally, per Section 110 of the Act, any individual who undertakes the restoration of a listed historic property, at their own expense and without compensation, may be granted a long-term residency permit at the discretion of the State Preservation Officer. This permit, once granted, cannot be revoked by any local or state authority, including law enforcement, as the property falls under federal protection. Iris reads the letter twice. She reads the accompanying documents, the forms, the permits, the legal language that spells out what this means. A long-term residency permit cannot be revoked, federal protection. She looks at Stanley. We're restorers, she says. What? We restored this lighthouse. We repaired the generator. We fixed the water system. We cleaned the lamp room. We did it at our own expense, without compensation. We don't have a permit. We can apply for one. The State Historic Preservation Officer is going to see that we have documented restoration of a historic property. We have photographs. We have the work we did. We have 3 months of evidence. Stanley stares at her. He remembers the photograph, the one from that Tuesday in November, the one where he holds the coffee cup and the parallel ruler sits on the windowsill, and he does not know what is coming. That photograph exists. It proves that he was in Port Townsend. But everything since then, the lighthouse, the generator, the water barrel, the garden that is here, that is theirs. Michael's going to fight this, he says. Michael can't fight federal law. He has lawyers. He has money. Money is not the same as law. Iris folds the letter carefully. She puts it in her pocket next to the tide chart, next to the photograph of the house. We need to contact the State Historic Preservation Officer, she says. Where do we find them? She looks at the box. There are more documents inside, letters, forms, contact information. Right here, she says. They spend the rest of the day reading. The box contains the complete history of the lighthouse designation, the correspondence between the Coast Guard and the Historical Society, the inspection reports, the maintenance records. It also contains something else, a letter dated 1990 from the last lighthouse keeper to the State Historic Preservation Officer. I have maintained this lighthouse for 28 years, the letter reads. I have repaired the structure, maintained the equipment, and ensured that the building remains in good condition. I have done so without compensation because I believe that this lighthouse matters. It matters to the ships that passed by. It matters to the coast. It matters to me. When I am gone, I hope that someone else will care for it, not because they have to, because they choose to. The letter is signed, Garrett T. Morrison, Lighthouse Keeper 1962-1990. Stanley reads the letter. He sets it down. He looks at the lamp room, at the glass walls, at the sea beyond, at the garden in the lower ring, at the green shoots reaching for the light. We're keeping this lighthouse, he says. Iris takes his hand. We're keeping this lighthouse, she agrees. They work through the night, assembling a case. Stanley photographed every repair, the generator housing, the fresh water line, the sealed window frames, the replastered walls. Iris drafted a letter to the State Historic Preservation Officer, citing federal statute, documenting their restoration work, attaching Garrett Morrison's letter as Exhibit A. By dawn, they had a packet thick enough to require 2 rubber bands. Stanley drove into Port Townsend while Iris stayed behind, watching the lighthouse shrink in the side mirror until it was just a white needle against the gray sky. He mailed the packet, certified mail, return receipt requested. Then he stood on the post office steps and watched the sun climb over the Olympic Mountains, and he thought about the photograph. The one from that Tuesday in November, the one where he had not known what was coming. He still did not know, but he was no longer afraid of not knowing. 3 days passed, then 5. The garden grew. The winter rye pushed up through the soil, and Iris marked the rows with sticks and string, and Stanley rebuilt the composting bin from salvaged lumber. They did not talk about Michael. They did not talk about the permit. They woke, and they worked, and they ate, and they slept, and the lighthouse stood around them like a patient animal waiting to be recognized. On the 6th day, the phone rang. It was an Olympia area code. Stanley picked up. Mr. Chen? Yes. This is Dr. Elara Vasquez, State Historic Preservation Officer. I received your application. Stanley's heart was a fist in his chest. We have reviewed the documentation, Dr. Vasquez continued. I have to say, this is unusual. Normally, preservation permits are sought before restoration work begins. But your case presents a unique set of circumstances. We didn't know about the designation. I understand, and your documentation is thorough. The work appears to have been done to professional standards. The letter from Mr. Morrison, well, that carries weight. More weight than you might realize. Silence. Dr. Vasquez, Stanley said. Will you approve the permit? Another silence. He could hear her breathing. Mr. Chen, do you know who currently holds the lease on that property? Yes. Michael Reeves. And do you know that Mr. Reeves has filed a lawsuit against the state, claiming that our office has no jurisdiction over the lighthouse because it was decommissioned? Stanley's stomach dropped. No, I didn't know that. He filed it 3 weeks ago. He's arguing that the federal designation lapsed when the Coast Guard left. He wants the property declared surplus and sold at auction. Stanley leaned against the wall. What does that mean for us? It means your permit application is now part of a legal proceeding. If Mr. Reeves wins, the designation is void, and so is your permit. If he loses, the designation stands and your permit would be granted. When will the court decide? The hearing is in 2 weeks. Stanley closed his eyes. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. Mr. Chen. One more thing. Yes? I read Mr. Morrison's letter. My father was a lighthouse keeper, not here Maine, but I understand what it means to care for something that no one else remembers. I'm on your side. He told Iris that evening. They sat in the garden watching the sunset stain the sky orange and pink and purple. The lighthouse cast a long shadow over the water. 2 weeks, Iris said. 2 weeks. What do we do? Stanley looked at the lighthouse, at the glass, at the light that no longer turned. At the garden, at her. We wait. They did not wait quietly. They planted more seeds. They repaired the railing on the catwalk. They painted the storage shed. They made a list of every tool they would need for the spring planting, and they drove into town to buy seeds, and they came back with packets of basil and oregano and thyme and a flat of strawberry starts. The garden grew. The days grew longer. And then, on a Tuesday morning, the phone rang again. It was not Dr. Vasquez. It was Michael. Stanley. Michael. I need to talk to you. Stanley held the phone away from his ear and looked at it. Then he brought it back. About what? About the lighthouse. I don't have anything to say to you. You will. Meet me at the Port Townsend Cafe. Noon. Bring your girlfriend. The line went dead. Iris did not want to go. He's going to try something, she said. Probably. Then why are we going? Stanley picked up his keys. Because I want to see his face when I tell him no. The Port Townsend Cafe was crowded with tourists. Stanley and Iris took a table by the window, and they watched the door and they waited. Michael walked in at 12:05. He looked different. His suit was wrinkled. His hair was uncombed. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands shook slightly as he pulled out a chair and sat down. Thank you for coming. We're not here to make this easy, Iris said. Michael nodded. He took a deep breath. I'm going to lose the lawsuit. Stanley blinked. What? I'm going to lose the lawsuit. My lawyers told me this morning. The judge ruled that the federal designation never lapsed. It was never properly revoked. The lighthouse is federal property, and the state has jurisdiction. Your permit will be granted. Stanley felt something loosen in his chest, then tighten again. Why are you telling us this? Michael looked down at the table. His hands were flat on the surface, palms down, as if he was trying to hold himself steady. Because I'm not just losing the lawsuit. I'm losing everything. He told them. The legal fees had drained his accounts. The investors had pulled out. The development deal in Hawaii had fallen through. His wife had left him. He was being investigated by the IRS for tax fraud related to the Port Townsend project. I don't have anything left, he said. No money, no prospects, no family. I flew out here because I thought I could salvage something, but there's nothing to salvage. He looked up. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. Stanley looked at him, at the man who had stolen his photograph, who had lied to him, who had tried to take away the only thing that ever felt like home. He felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just nothing. I forgive you, he said. Iris looked at him. Michael looked at him. I don't want you in my life, Stanley continued. I don't want to see you again, but I forgive you, for the photograph, for the lies, for everything. Michael's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just leave. Michael stood up. He walked to the door. He paused. Stanley? The lighthouse. You were right to keep it. Some things are worth more than money. He left. They sat in silence. Iris reached across the table and took his hand. That was kind of you. It wasn't kindness. It was necessity. What do you mean? Stanley looked out the window. The sun was bright. The water was blue. The lighthouse was somewhere out there, waiting for them. Holding on to anger would have been a weight. I didn't want to carry it anymore. The permit arrived by certified mail 5 days later. Stanley opened the envelope with shaking hands. The document was official, embossed with the state seal, signed by Dr. Lara Vasquez. Long-term residency permit granted to Stanley Chen and Iris Park For the property known as the Cape Flattery Lighthouse, this permit cannot be revoked by any local or state authority. Effective immediately. Iris read it over his shoulder. She started to cry. Stanley pulled her into his arms, and they stood in the kitchen of the lighthouse, holding each other, and the permit sat on the table between them, and the garden grew outside, and the light in the lamp room waited for someone to turn it on again. They did not celebrate. They planted. The strawberries went into the ground first, their roots spread carefully in the soil, their leaves reaching for the sun, then the basil, the oregano, the thyme, then the tomatoes, the peppers, the cucumbers, the squash. The garden filled the lower ring. Stanley built a trellis for the beans. Iris marked the paths with stones from the beach. They worked from dawn until dusk, and when they were too tired to stand, they sat on the bench they had built and watched the light change over the water. The days blurred together. Spring came. The rain stopped. The sun grew warm, and then, one morning Stanley woke to find that the garden had bloomed. The strawberries were red. The tomatoes were heavy on the vines. The basil was fragrant and green. He stood on the catwalk and looked down at the garden, at the green leaves and the bright fruit, at the lighthouse, at the sea, at the sky. Iris came up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist. "We did this," she said. "We did." "What now?" He turned to face her. "Now we live." They got a dog. A mutt from the shelter, part retriever and part something no one could identify. They named him Morrison, after the keeper who had written the letter. The dog followed them everywhere. He slept at the foot of the bed. He dug holes in the garden. He barked at the seagulls. He was perfect. Summer came. They worked on the lighthouse. Stanley climbed the tower every week to check the glass, to oil the hinges, to make sure that everything was as it should be. Iris kept the garden, harvested the vegetables, cooked meals in the small kitchen, baked bread in the oven that Stanley had repaired. They had visitors. Dr. Vasquez came to see the lighthouse. She stood in the lamp room and looked out at the sea. "My father would have loved this," she said. "What do you mean?" "He always said that lighthouses are the only buildings that remember. They remember the ships that passed, the storms that came, the keepers who stayed." She turned to face them. "You're keepers now." Fall came. The leaves turned. The air grew cold. The storms returned. They battened down the lighthouse. They stored the garden. They sealed the windows. And then, on a night in November, the power went out. The storm had been building for days. The wind howled. The rain lashed the windows. The generator spluttered and died. They sat in the dark, listening to the storm. "We should have fixed the light," Stanley said. "We can't fix the light. The mechanism is broken." "I know." They sat in silence. And then Iris said, "But we can light it ourselves." They carried candles up the tower, dozens of them, tea lights and pillar candles and votives. They placed them on the windowsills, on the floor, on the railing of the catwalk. When they were done, the lamp room was filled with light. It was not the light of the old beacon. It was not bright enough to guide ships, but it was warm, and it was golden, and it was theirs. They stood in the center of the lamp room, surrounded by flame. "It's beautiful," Iris said. "It is." They stayed there until the storm passed. Winter came. They read books. They played cards. They made love by the fire. The dog slept on the rug. The garden slept under the snow. The lighthouse stood. And then, one morning in February, Stanley found a note on the kitchen table. It was handwritten on a piece of paper torn from a notebook. "I'm sorry I didn't say this in person. I couldn't. But I wanted you to know that I saw the photograph, the one from that Tuesday in November. I finally understood what it meant. You were home. I was just passing through. The lighthouse is yours. It always was." Stanley read the note twice. He folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he went outside to feed the dog. That afternoon, they walked to the beach. The tide was low. The sand was wet and firm. The dog ran ahead, chasing seagulls that always stayed just out of reach. Iris picked up a stone, flat and smooth, worn by the water, she said. She held it out to him. On one side, there was a fossil. "A spiral pressed into the stone millions of years ago." "A relic," Stanley said. "A relic." He took the stone. He turned it over in his hands. "Do you think we'll stay here forever?" Iris asked. He looked at the lighthouse, at the white tower against the gray sky, at the garden sleeping under the snow, at the dog running on the beach, at her. "I don't know," he said. He put the stone in his pocket, next to the note. They walked back to the lighthouse together. The dog followed. The tide came in. The light in the lamp room was off, but the candles were ready, and the garden was waiting, and the relic was warm against his thigh. And in the kitchen, on the table, next to the photograph of the house on the hill, the permit sat under a jar of strawberry jam, and the note sat in his pocket, and the lighthouse stood at the edge of the continent, looking out at the sea, waiting for the next storm, the next keeper, the next light. The dog barked at the door. Stanley opened it. They went inside.